Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another TBR video. For those of you who might be new to my channel, I'm in the comment fields last time. I got a couple of questions. TBR, of course, is to be read on BookTube, but for the purpose of this video, it means to be released. And what I do is at the end of each month, beginning of the new month, I look at the month ahead and I look at the new releases that will come out that month, and then I pick a couple, this time it's 6, that I personally find interesting. So it's all books that I haven't read yet, and in that sense it's also TBR, to be read by me, but it's new releases. And as always, we start off with literary fiction. And for those of you who know me, my pick for June might not come as a surprise because it's Joyce Carol Oates' new novel, My Life as a Rat, which will come out on the 4th of June. Now, Joyce Carol Oates doesn't need an introduction. She's one of the most well-known and prolific American novelists. She has a book out, I think, almost every year. And this year, in the fall, she will have a collection out as well, so 2 books a year. I'm still working my way through her backlist. I haven't managed to read everything, and then she comes out with a new one. Anyway, My Life as a Rat is the story of Violet Kerrigan, a woman, older woman, from what I understand, looking back at her life when she was banished from her family because at age 12 she informed on her older brother. She's a one child out of 5 in a happy family back then, but her older brothers murdered an African-American man, or a boy, I think, and Violet informed on them, and they got arrested and convicted, and Violet got banished from the family. So from what I understand, it's a looking back on what happened, and I expect that, the book is marketed as family relations, and whether it's more important to speak the truth or whether it's more important to be loyal to the family. But given the topic, the murder, a racist murder, I expect Joyce Carol Oates also to address the issue of race, which is, of course, in the US a topic that is hotter now than it had ever been. Well, that might not be true, ever been, but you know what I mean. It's a hot topic at the moment, especially in the current political climate. So I can't say that I love everything Joyce Carol Oates puts out, which would be impossible given the immensity of her work, but I will always turn, to a new release and try to read it. So My Life as a Rat, coming out of the beginning of June, is my first pick in the category literary fiction. The next book I want to talk to you about also comes out on the 4th of June, and it's historical fiction, and maybe the choice surprises you, and that's Elizabeth Gilbert's new book, City of Girls. Girls, that in the title. But anyway, I have a soft spot for Elizabeth Gilbert. Of course, you know her as the best-selling author of Eat, Pray, Love and maybe Big Magic, but she also writes fiction. Actually, she started out as a fiction writer. Her first book, published almost 20 years ago, was a novel, Stern Man. And even though Elizabeth Gilbert made her fame with her memoir, Eat, Pray, Love, I think she is actually underrated as a fiction writer, especially historical fiction. But anyway, City of Girls, coming out on the 4th of June. It's like the book I talked to you about previously, My Life as a Rat, is told in retrospect. So we have 95-year-old Vivian Morris in 2015-ish, looking back at her life. And then the story develops from when Vivian is 19 years old and she's kicked out of Vassar College because her grades are bad, and her parents sent her off to New York to live with an aunt, and her aunt owns a theater, and Vivian then gets into the world of showgirls, a theater, but more, not the serious quote unquote theater of plays, but the more musical side of theater, so the showgirl side of theater. And then the story takes off from there, telling us Vivian's life in that setting. What I find interesting about it is, first of all, the 1940s in New York. And I watched a couple of interviews with Gilbert talking about the book. And she was obviously especially interested in the life of women in that theater setting, the promiscuity, the sexuality, the freedom of sexuality in that setting, which is something that I don't know anything about. Because for me, the 1940s and 50s are not the epitome of sexual freedom, especially not for women. So I thought that approach to that time period was interesting. And that's the reason that I picked City of Girls as the historical fiction pick for my June TBR. For the next two books, we move on to nonfiction, and I picked two memoirs for the to-be-released list in June. And the first one is Nada Bakos, The Targeter, My Life in the CIA, which also comes out on the 4th of June. Nada Bakos joined the CIA just before 9/11 in 1999, and she's worked as a CIA analyst, intelligence officer for more than 30 years. She has left the CIA now, and she has written a memoir about her work as an analyst, about her rising through the ranks as a female intelligence officer, the hunt for al-Zarqawi. I'm a sucker for these kind of memoirs. CIA intelligence works always intrigues me. I don't know how critical she will be about the CIA work. And Nada Bakos is, at least some claim, that she was the inspiration for the main female character in the movie Zero Dark 30. Maya, if you remember her, quite a tough cookie, also with regard to torture. So I'm a bit on the fence about the book. I mean, I'm interested, but I don't know how much I will appreciate it. But I'm still really interested in a memoir by somebody who worked in the CIA, and especially a female officer who worked in the CIA. So that's why this book made the list. The second memoir is by an author you might know from her fiction work, and that is Nnedi Okorafor's memoir coming out on the 18th of June, Broken Places, Outer Spaces. Now, as I said, you might know Nnedi Okorafor, a Nigerian-American author, from her fiction work, her sort of fantasy sci-fi books, most famously the Binti series. But what you might not know is that Okorafor was, when she was in college, she was an athlete. And I'm not sure whether she wanted to pursue a career as an athlete, but she had problems with scoliosis, and she got an operation, and she woke up paralyzed. She couldn't move her legs, and she spent several months in hospital. And it was then, as what I understood at least, is that she, started to pass the time by making all these fantastical stories, which then turned into her becoming a fiction writer. But this memoir, from what I understand from the blurb, and that's why I find it really interesting, is centering around her childhood as a Nigerian American, and then her career, if you might call it that, in college, university as an athlete, and then the subsequent paralysis and recovery, and turning to a creative life as a writer. And I thought that sounded absolutely fascinating. I enjoy Okorafor's fiction work. I'm not a over the moon fan of it. It's too much of the fantasy element for me that doesn't quite 100% gel with me, but they are good books and they have quite a fan community. So she is an established, well-regarded author in that field. But the journey to becoming this author, I thought that sounded fascinating. So Broken Places, Outer Spaces is the second memoir and my pick for the June TBR. There are two more books to go, and book number 5. For book number 5, we move to crime. And the book I picked for the June TBR is also by an author you might know from her other fiction work, and I'm talking about Kate Atkinson and her new book Big Sky, which is the number 5 in her Jackson Brodie series. After an almost 9-year hiatus, the last book started early, Took My Dog, number 4 in the Jackson Brodie series, came out 8 or 9 years ago. Kate Atkinson was born in York and she lives in Edinburgh, and I think you probably know her from her best-selling novels Life After Life. But she started out as a crime writer, and she still does, even though there was a 9-year gap between number 4 and number 5 in the Jackson Brodie series. Now, Jackson Brodie is an ex-military policeman, private investigator, and now in this 5th book in the series, Big Sky, he has relocated to a quiet village, seaside village, living there with his teenage son and a dog, and he does private investigative work again. He investigates a cheating spouse, and then the plot develops from there. I have to say, I don't know much more than that, but I really enjoy the Jackson Brodie series. Not every book in the series. I think that's typical. If you have a series, at least for me, not every book appeals to me in the same way, but I still really enjoy the series, and I was absolutely delighted when I saw that the series will continue after this 9-year pause with Big Sky. So of course this book had to make my June TBR. Oh, and I forgot to say that Big Sky will come out end of June, 18th and 24th, depending on UK, US publication. Anyway. The last book, as always, we end with sci-fi. And for June, I picked the first in a new space opera series called The Protectorate. And the first book is called Velocity Weapon, and the author is Megan O'Keefe. The book will come out middle of June, 11th, and Megan O'Keefe is a Californian-based writer who writes big, sweeping space opera / fantasy series. Her last series, The Scorched Continent, was more a fantasy series than sci-fi. But this one is supposed to be a space opera, and I'm always in for a new space opera series. Now, the first book, Velocity Weapon, we have siblings who are involved in a space war, and then something goes horribly wrong, and one of the siblings is caught by the enemy and wakes up 230 years later when the war is over and lost, and then she has to find a way to bridge time and space in order to find her lost sibling and make things right. Now, it sounds fabulous. It sounds like your typical space opera thing. And I like that kind of stuff, if it's done well. So I'm really looking forward to trying out this new series with the first book, Velocity Weapon, and then we'll see, hopefully it's any good. So these were my 6 picks for the June TBR. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments, of course, whether any of the books that I mentioned interest you, or whether you have a June release that you are especially looking forward to. I'm always happy to get recommendations, and I'll see you all soon in the next one. Bye-bye.